All right, let's talk about methods of sampling. But before we talk about the 6 methods of sampling that you're going to have to basically memorize, I need to make sure that you understand what bias is. Is this a word that you guys know kind of in your everyday life? Can somebody just raise your hand real quick and tell me, what do you think bias is? What does that word mean to you? Tell me something. Okay, so if your opinion is swayed in one direction or another. So there really, I'm going to talk about 2 senses of the word bias, and that's one of them. So if you're somebody that's writing a poll, okay, so you're going to write a survey or something, you're trying to collect data. You have to be careful about how you're wording your questions. So for example, if I was doing a survey on cars, like do you prefer this type of car or do you prefer that type of a car? What would be wrong with this question? Okay, do you prefer this ugly, boxy car from Chevy, or do you prefer this sleek, stylish car from Ford? What's wrong with the wording of that question? Right, it's leaning toward Ford. You can tell by the way I'm wording the question. I'm going to get more people responding, oh, I want the sleek, stylish car because of the way I'm wording the question. Instead of if I just made a clean question that was like, do you prefer this Ford or do you prefer this Chevy, period, with no commentary. All right, so that's one example of bias. Also, bias in statistics means if you have a sample, meaning like a small group that you're trying to survey or collect data on, that's supposed to represent the bigger population. If for any reason your sample does not match the general population, for any reason, then that's going to be considered bias. So for example, if I was interested in the heights of students at Roswell High School, all right, I just wanted to know, how tall are you guys? If I went down and, oh, here's the basketball team, okay, they'll be a good sample, let me measure them. Do you think that the heights of the basketball team will be a good representation of the population as a whole? No. What do you think is probably going to happen with that sample? Right, it's going to be taller. They're going to be taller than the typical kid. So that sample is not representative of the population. So we would say that sample is biased. So can you hear that's a different kind of bias because it's not about persuading anyone. But if your sample is skewed, all right, if your sample leans one way just in the data and it doesn't represent the population, that's another way of talking about the word bias. Okay, so bias is something that we're trying to avoid. Okay, so here come the 6 sampling methods that you basically need to memorize. I'm going to go through them, give you a couple of examples on each one. Take notes so that you can understand. If you have any questions, just ask me, because this is basically most of what your next quiz is going to be on. All right, first of the 6. Now, okay, look. These 6 methods vary in terms of how good they are at producing results that are unbiased. So these first 2 are the worst ones, okay? They're kind of the ones that you want to try to avoid if you can. But they get used a lot, so we need to talk about them. But these first 2 produce a lot of bias. So remember that, maybe take note of that. Voluntary response sample. All right, voluntary response is where the people who are taking the survey or whatever, in some sense they chose themselves to be in the survey, to be in the sample. So one example is if you just post a survey on a website or something like that. So people that go to that website, and oh, like it pops up, here's a survey, anybody who wants to take it, that's going to be voluntary response because you can just X that out. You know, you don't have to take the survey, so people take the survey if they feel like it. The reason why voluntary response, Christian, Mondays are rough, aren't they, bro? Hang in there, buddy. You can do this, man. The reason why voluntary response samples tend to be biased. Only the people that really care about a particular topic a lot are going to tend to bother taking the survey. Most people, that survey pops up, they just click it away, they ignore it. But the people that are affected by that issue, like for example, if I was doing a survey on, okay, we need to save money in the budget. So we're thinking about cutting the art department, all right? Some people are saying, art, that's not important, that's not academic, we're gonna cut that. Now, if I put a voluntary response survey out, the people that have no artistic talent whatsoever, they're probably not gonna take the survey because it doesn't apply to them, they don't care. The people that are the artists in the population, they're gonna see that and be like, no, we're not cutting art, art is important, art is wonderful. They're going to take the survey. So that survey is going to be biased because the people that really care about it are the only ones that are going to take the survey. So your results will be off. Okay, so website is one example. Another common example of a voluntary response type sample would be, I think they do this sometimes with you guys. If they just put out a survey, say in the cafeteria, they set up a table, and here's a stack of surveys and a sign. Come and take your survey. That would be another voluntary response. Right, Alec? See your eyelids getting a little heavy. Right, tell me what I just said. Spaced out. Okay, that's what I'm here for, buddy. We were saying we got the website, post something on a website. That's one example of voluntary response. If you just set up a table with a sign saying, hey, surveys here, come take a survey, that's another common example of voluntary response. People just come by, take the survey if they feel like it. Okay? Moving on. Another sampling method that is problematic is convenience sampling. All right? Convenience sampling is where the person conducting the survey or whatever, they just choose the sample that's right in front of them. You know, just they choose a sample that's easy to get to. So, for example, if I wanted to see how you guys feel about the bell schedule, maybe they're thinking about changing the bell schedule. I want to know, how do Roswell High School students feel about a new proposed bell schedule? If I just asked you guys, all right, oh, my first period class, you guys are right here, let me survey you. That would be an example of a convenience sample, okay, and as opposed to just going throughout the whole building and somehow getting more people involved. The problem with convenience samples is that it's real easy to accidentally get a biased sample that doesn't represent the general group. Like earlier when I was mentioning about the football players. I was talking about basketball players. Again, if I wanted to see the heights of all the students at Roswell High School, and oh look, a bus just pulled up, I'll just survey them. I'll measure their heights. If that bus happens to be the basketball team, that's going to be off. Or if I walk into any random classroom in this building, all right, and I just pick that one classroom, okay, they just happen to be across the hall. There's a good chance that it's going to be a class of freshmen, say. Okay, most of the classes in the building are, one class or another, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. There's some mixed ones, but if I just pick an easy class that's right in front of me or across the hall, it might be all freshmen, in which case those heights on average are going to be shorter and not represent the entire population well. Okay, so convenience messes you up. It gets you some biased results that way. All right, so those are the first two. Any questions so far? Okay. Now, the last four are less biased. They're not all equal, though. Okay? Now, this is the gold standard. The one I'm about to say now is the best one. So if you see this simple random sample, that's the one that is the least biased of all. All right, simple random is where every single member of the population that you're trying to study has an equal chance of being selected for the sample. And it's got to be random. So this could be accomplished by, like all of you guys have a student ID number. So if every single student was in the computer and the computer randomly chose 50 kids from among all of you, then that would be simple random. Okay, that would be the least biased. Okay. The next one is systematic sample. Now, do you hear that root word in there? System. So any sampling method that involves some type of a system, and it's usually going to sound like this. Every fifth person that walked in the door. Christian, open your eyes, buddy. Open your eyes. Every fifth person that walks in the door gets a survey. Every 10th person, every other person, every third person. It's usually going to sound something like that for the systematic. Okay, that's not as good as simple random, but it is less biased than the two that we talked about before. Let's see what's next. All right, these last two are the hardest for students to understand. Kids get these mixed up all the time. So really listen hard. If you're falling asleep because it's Monday, focus your mind. Try to get these last two, okay? Let's see, stratified random. Stratified random. When we talk about stratified, we're talking about, first, let's divide everyone up into types. And then we're going to randomly pick a few from each type. So in a school setting, I'm going to use the example of we got freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. If we're talking about the rules about leaving campus or something like that, who's going to care more about the rules? Are we allowed to, we're thinking about, are we allowed to go to Wendy's or Zaxby's or whatever during lunch? What is the rule on that? Is that currently technically not allowed? That's supposed to be not allowed. But okay, so imagine they're thinking about, I said technically because we know. Every day, fifth period, I see all the Chick-fil-A coming back in here. Anyway, let's say they were planning on relaxing that rule. Who do you think would care more about those rules, freshmen or seniors? All right, obviously seniors are going to care more about that because why? Right, they're the ones that drive, okay? So you would expect that the opinions of freshmen might be different from the opinions of seniors because freshmen just aren't really going to care that much. So what you might want to do is have a stratified sample where we're going to make sure that we get some freshmen, some sophomores, some juniors, some seniors. If you just did random, just by chance, you might accidentally wind up with a bunch of freshmen in your sample and not very many seniors. Just randomly, that could happen. So if you want to make sure that each different strata, each different category is represented, you ahead of time decide, okay, we're going to do 25 freshmen, 25 sophomores, 25 juniors, and 25 seniors. And then we'll randomly pick the 25 in each category. That's stratified. All right? Strata are the categories. This happens with race a lot. Okay? Sometimes different races will vary. Like if you're talking politics, just statistically, for whatever reason, black people are more likely to vote Democratic than white people are more likely to vote Republican. Those numbers are different. Those percentages are different by race. All right, it's just the way it happens. So if you wanted to make sure that all the different types were included, sometimes they'll break it down by race. And they'll say, okay, we're going to make sure that we survey 100 black people, 100 white people, 100 Hispanics, 100 Asians. All right, I don't want to go through listing all the races. But you get it. That's stratified. Okay? Now, that brings us down to the last one. Cluster sampling. That's where instead of randomly picking individuals, I'm randomly picking groups. All right? Again, bringing it back to the school setting. Imagine that instead of randomly picking individual students, I'm randomly picking whole classrooms. So, for example, we have advisement, where they're handing out schedules and report cards. Every advisement has a number. So maybe instead of going by student number and just picking individual students, maybe I put all of the advisement numbers in a computer and randomly pick, let's say, 5 advisements. So if those 5 advisements that get picked, all of the students in those classes are going to take this survey. So we're picking whole classes at a time, not individuals. That's cluster sampling. Okay? So again, just keeping that straight from stratified. Stratified, that's where you're picking a few members of each type. Cluster is where you're randomly picking whole groups at a time. Right, Christian? How heavy are your eyelids right now? 5 pounds, 10 pounds?
10 pounds.
All right, 5 pounds each or 10 pounds each?
10 pounds each.
Okay, that's pretty heavy. Those eyelids that looked about what they are. Okay, all right, it's time to see how much of what I'm saying you guys have absorbed on this Sleepy Monday. I've written the 6 sampling methods on the board here behind me. Notice I didn't have you pick up your dry erase boards with the markers and the rags because this is easy to show on your fingers. Worst case scenario, if we pick cluster sampling, you're going to show me, you're going to have to use 2 hands for that to show me your 6 fingers. Okay? So you're going to be holding up fingers to show me which one of these you think it is. Okay? All right, in each case, we're also going to talk about bias, like whether or not this would be bias and why. Before we actually do the ones on the paper, oh yeah, I should mention, nobody asked me for doing your homework early. This lesson is not about getting the answers real quick. This is about like having a class discussion. So no one's going to be done until we're all done because we're having a class discussion. I'm going to give you one example off the top of my head that didn't make it onto the paper that I think is a good example. Okay, so just listen to this verbally and get ready to choose which one of these it is, and then we'll talk about any problems. All right, I'm a farmer. I've got all different crates of apples. Apparently I'm an apple farmer, I just decided. So I walk into the, the warehouse, and I'm looking across boxes and boxes of apples. I want to do a quick quality control survey to see, okay, how my apples are doing. So the way I decide to, I don't want to look at every individual apple, right, Alec? That would take like all year. I don't have that kind of time. So what I do is I look, I open each crate and I just go ahead and look at the apples that are sitting on the top. Okay? So I'm not seeing all the apples that are underneath, but that's okay because on the top I can see a good, 15 to 20 apples. All right, and I'm feeling, as a farmer, I'm like, that's enough apples for, that'll give me a good idea of how the rest of them are looking. All right, so that's what I do. I walk across the warehouse, I peek open the lids, and I just look in the tops of all of them. Okay, now, take 10 seconds to decide which one of these 6 methods it is. For the people watching the video, let me scroll back down. You know what, I should make a smaller list. Hold on. All right, show me on your fingers which one of these sampling methods I just described, peeking in the tops of all those apples. All right, put them down. All right, for the people watching this video, almost everyone in my class held up 2 fingers for the convenience method. All right, that's right. This was convenience. Now, real quick, tell me, somebody raise your hand and tell me why. What's the problem? Why is this going to give me a biased sample? Go. This is Shireen talking. She's awesome. Go ahead. I forgot to mention your name, so I was going to shout out to Shireen real quick.
No, it's convenience because he did the easy way for him.
Right, that's why it's convenience. Why is it biased? Why is it going to give me a...
show like the whole selection of what the apples are.
True, it does not show the whole selection, but
So it's all going to be...
is there any reason why we should think that the ones on the bottom are going to be any different than the ones on the top? Like,
the ones on the bottom are older.
no, they all got put in the box at the same time. They all got in the box simultaneously. Jump in, Jacob.
They would be in different conditions than the ones on the top.
Why?
Because they would have a bunch of weight on them.
Yeah, okay. The ones at the bottom are more likely to have bruises and stuff. They're at the bottom. They got the weight of the ones at the top. All right? They're being crushed a little bit. The ones at the bottom are always more raggedy than the ones at the top. Okay? That's why when you go to the supermarket, just, stick to the top, people. Come on. Think about it. All right, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now back on the paper. Look at problem number 1. A teacher wants to find out if students prefer school lunches or lunches from home. Identify the type of sample described, and then we're going to talk about whether or not it's biased. All right, the teacher surveys every 7th student that goes through the lunch line. Take 5 seconds to decide which one of these 6 things. Every 7th student. For the people watching the video, here's that list again. All right, put them up. Which method is this? Waiting on Alec. We're waiting on Alec, people. All right, I'm messing with Alec because it's Monday. All right, put him down. Almost everyone was saying systematic. Okay, that's right. Systematic is the one where we're doing like every 3rd one, every 4th one, every 5th one. That's the most common way of saying systematic. Okay, now the second question is a little bit tricky. Systematic is one of the methods that is less biased, all right, than some of the other methods. Can somebody talk to me about a source of bias that still might be present in this example anyway? Scotty. This is Scotty talking. Scotty's awesome.
Okay, so it says that they're going through the lunch line. So obviously they're getting school lunch, so that's kind of biased because maybe that's what they prefer because you're not getting students that aren't going through the school lunch because of the lunch line.
Right. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Okay. The teacher wants to find out if students, like in general, prefer lunches from home or lunches bought at school. But the teacher only surveyed students that are already in the lunch line. Okay? So just on average, the kids in the lunch line, there's going to be more of them that prefer school lunches. Okay? Some kids didn't have a choice, so they just went to the lunch line even though they don't like it. But on average, you're going to have more kids that prefer the lunch line. In the lunch line, that's just common sense, all right? All those kids with bag lunches, loving their bag lunches, they're not included in the survey. So this would be biased for that reason for sure. All right, now let's move on to part B of this question. Of course, because why would we go anywhere else? Part A, there's part B. We're going to do part B. From a random name lottery, the teacher chooses 150 students to survey. All right? Take 5 seconds to decide which one of these it is. All right, put them up. Show me on your fingers. Random name lottery. Okay. I'm seeing 3s and 5s. What was your vote? 3s? Tristan, what was your vote? All right, I feel like I'm saying 3s and 5s. Let me see what those two are. Simple random and stratified random. this would be simple random. Okay, everybody is in a, yeah, from a random name lottery. So stratified is where you break out by different groups. Like 25 freshmen, 25 sophomores, 25 juniors, 25 seniors, something like that, categories. In part B here, nothing about any kind of special categories are mentioned. It's just like a name lottery, randomly picking 150 kids. Boom, that's simple random. All right, so that was simple random. All right, now, number 2. Having a little deja vu. I feel like somehow.
Was there bias?
Oh, bias. Yeah, talk to me about bias real quick with the random name lottery. What do you think about bias?
I think there's a little because the teacher's picking names.
But it's a random name lottery. So it's,
Okay, no, there's no bias.
no, there's no bias that we would expect. Yeah, this is about as random and unbiased as you can possibly get. Every single member of the population had an equal chance in this lottery to get picked. This is as unbiased as it gets. All right? All right, now let's move on to number 2. A local politician wants to survey his constituents. That just means the potential voters in his district. So he mails surveys to the constituents that are members of his political party. So if he's a Republican, then he sent surveys to other Republicans. He only uses the surveys that are returned, of course. Couldn't really use the ones that are in the trash can. Identify the type of sample and tell whether the sample is biased. Okay, now take 5 seconds to pick from this list. Okay, show me on your fingers. Okay, send out the mailer. Got the responses. Which one is this? Okay, keep them up for one more second. I'm seeing mostly 1s and a couple of 2s. Okay, all right, put them down. Okay, this would be an example of voluntary. Okay, now let me say this about convenience. I know that you guys have you know what the word convenience means. Anything that seems easy, like, oh, it's, like, what could, for example, one of the main examples for voluntary response I gave you in the notes was website, right? A survey on a website. Now, what could be more convenient? What could be more easy than that? So as students, you guys tend to want to say convenience often because, like, if it sounds easy, you're like, oh, that's convenient, so boom, it must be convenience. So here's a hint to you. If there's any other method that it sounds like applies, if there's any other specific thing happening, go with that one. It's going to probably be convenience only if there's nothing else that applies to it. Okay? So like if I pick every 5th person or something like that, what method is that? That's systematic. Regardless of how easy, like maybe that sounded really easy, so you want to say convenience because look, that was so easy. You just picked every 5th person. Don't just go with your gut in terms of what sounds easy. If you can hear the other method in there, go with the other method. Okay? So in this one, you have a survey that's mailed out. That's just like a web survey, or it's just like the survey that's left on the table. People have the option of they can either send it back or put it in the trash can. So that's going to be a voluntary response, for sure. Okay, now, why is there an obvious source of bias in here? Jacob?
One, it's the only people that really care about it would send it back. And also it says his constituents, or however you say that, it's only his political party, but not all of them as a whole.
Wow, my handwriting is really bad when I'm writing at speed. Yeah, that was a full and complete answer, okay? Of course, this has the usual problems with a voluntary response, that the people that care the most are going to be the only people that respond. That's true for any voluntary response sample. But also, in the problem it specifically mentioned, he only surveyed people in his own political party. So obviously that's going to be biased for that reason. Okay, let's move on to number 3. Comcast wants to find out if its customers like the new voice control remote. Identify the type of sample used. Okay, so they randomly choose 10 zip codes and they survey every customer in those 10 zip codes. Okay? They're choosing zip codes. Which sample is this? Go ahead and start showing me on your fingers which type of sampling method this is. Uh-oh, I lost my buddy. All right, show me on your fingers which one it is. We're randomly picking zip codes of people. Okay, put them down. Most people were saying item number 6. Okay, that's right. This is an example of cluster sampling. We're picking whole zip codes at a time. We're still randomly, but randomly picking zip codes, not individual people. So that's cluster sampling. Right, Christian, buddy? Right, Christian, buddy? Okay. All right, quickly, what's next? Because we're running out of time. Okay, 3B. They post a survey on their website. Okay, well, we're going to have to switch to verbal responses here because we only got like 3.5 minutes left. So if they post a survey on their website, which method is that for sure? That's definitely going to be voluntary. Okay, and this one was, what did I say, cluster. Okay, yeah, website, that's automatically voluntary. A presidential candidate wants to see if registered voters in Ohio would vote for him. He randomly selects 100 white voters, 100 black voters, and 100 Latino voters to survey. Which sampling method is this?
Stratified.
Yeah, this is that stratified random. Stratified. I forgot like a couple letters, didn't I? Stratified random, okay? Because you can hear the categories in there that lets you know that it's stratified. Okay. And finally, let's talk about wording of a question. So let's see. Considering that some cell phone users have developed brain cancer, should all cell phones come with a warning label explaining the danger of using cell phones? What about that question might be a little bit biasing? Right, it's talking about the brain cancer. It's going to give you brain cancer. Don't you think we want to have a label on there? Brain cancer. So that would be a source of bias. Okay, what about this next question? Do you agree that a national system of health insurance should be favored because it would provide health insurance for everyone and would reduce administrative costs? Why is that biasing? Yeah, just jump in there.
It says a positive about it, and it doesn't really ask you. It says, would this be better? And then it says, why would be better, not why would be worse.
Right, wouldn't this be better? It's going to give health coverage to everybody and reduce costs. Doesn't it sound great? Wouldn't this be a great thing? That's called a leading question. So that would be very biasing. What about this last one? In view of escalating economical degradation and incipient resource depletion, would you favor economic incentives for recycling of resource-intensive consumer goods? What's wrong with that question?
Depending on who you're surveying, you're going to get a lot of people, like when you survey high school students, you're going to get a lot of people who don't understand what you're talking about.
You're going to get a lot of people who don't understand, even if you're surveying adults. You're going to get a bunch of, it's just confusing wording, so that's the main problem with that question. Well, let me wrap up this video. All right, I hope this video has been helpful. I will see you on the next video.